The Museum of Fine Arts Houston presents Jacoby Satterwhite, A Meta Prayer. Interdisciplinary artist Jacoby Satterwhite transforms the museum's vast Cullinan Hall with a meta prayer. The expansive multimedia installation that fuses choreography, video, animation, lighting, and music to reimagine a kaleidoscope of computer-generated works. A meta prayer constructs a digital space that represents love, joy, and resilience. The soundtrack pulses with energy, providing the video its driving beat. This exhibition is on view through October 13th at the MFAH. Visit mfah.org/meta to learn more. Today on CityCast Houston, crime gets a lot of headlines around town, but new data from Axios Houston found that so far this year, more Houstonians have died in car crashes than by homicide. So why are Houston roads so dangerous, and how can we make them safer? Axios Houston reporter J.R. Jordan joins me to answer those questions and more. It's Monday, September 9th. I'm Rahil Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Hey, Jay, welcome back in, man. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. Not too bad at all. It's a good start to the week, and I want to start with this. What is your craziest Houston driving story?
Oh, man. A couple years ago, I was driving down Griggs Road, I think. I was in the left lane. This guy in the right lane decides to make a left turn right in front of me and just rips off my front bumper.
Oh,
Uninsured driver, all this stuff. That's kind of a pretty typical Houston crash story that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to.
yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be talking about those drivers here throughout this conversation. But let's start with your big story that has everybody talking about how unsafe our roads are. What did you find?
So about a month ago, I started to dig into some numbers from the Texas Department of Transportation. They receive crash reports from law enforcement agencies all around the state. Police in Houston reported that 169 people had died in car crashes on Houston streets.
Wow.
In the first half of 2024. And that's compared to 158 people who died by homicide in the same time frame in the city of Houston. Those numbers aren't normally lopsided like that. Over the last 5 years, since 2019, homicides have outnumbered car crashes. But as we see the violent crime rate drop in the city of Houston, we're seeing the number of people dead in car crashes grow.
So as Houstonians, we know that a lot of us are using the roads, right? And actually at Axios, y'all reported last year that the average Houstonian travels over 35,000 miles a year, more than the national average, by the way. So with millions of cars on the road and thousands of miles traveled, it seems like accidents are going to happen, and unfortunately, deaths will occur, right? And when you compare the number 169 traffic deaths to 158 homicides, that's about a 10% difference. So is this number really that shocking? Like, is it really a big number?
So car crashes happen. And a big point is that they're not accidents. They're car crashes. They're avoidable. We call them accidents. It makes it feel like they're just going to happen. We have to accept that as a part of our society. And that's just not the case. The same with homicides. When I posted the story in Reddit, a handful of the comments were thinking, like, why is this news that more people die in traffic than homicides? Like, in Houston, at least in Harris County, more people die by homicide than in traffic crashes, which is why this is very interesting. And I'll tell you what, I'm working on a follow-up story, and I'll give you a little bit. So in Harris County, if you look at Harris County as a whole, and you take out the city of Houston, right? That includes unincorporated areas of Harris County and all the different smaller cities. From 2019 to 2022, homicides outnumbered traffic crashes. But by the end of 2023 in Harris County, without the city of Houston, deaths from traffic crashes outnumbered homicides for the first time.
For a lot of listeners, that might be surprising. Like, there are more traffic deaths than homicides. Why do traffic deaths get so overlooked?
They happen so frequently. Everybody has a car. And if you look at homicides, the vast majority of those are shooting deaths, gun violence. Not everybody has a gun, but everybody has a car or access to a car by and large. And, it's just one of those things that we take for granted whenever we're involved in a car crash. We don't want to think we did anything wrong. We don't want to think that, the road was set up, horribly or whatever. We want to deal with our little circumstance and get over with it.
When you posted this story, it started going everywhere on X, on Reddit. I saw it on even the Houston Chronicles website. But I want to go to Reddit real quickly because in the Houston subreddit, a poster posed this question. You're the dictator of Houston. How do you solve traffic? And it had over 600 comments. Houstonians had a lot of ideas. Some were simple as just the word trains. Someone else took the time to write out a Parks and Rec inspired monologue where, I don't know if you remember this, but it was basically, you're not using a turn signal, right to jail. You're playing your music too loud, right to jail, right away. Driving too fast, right to jail, right? And so on and so on. And look, this was all in good fun, but while Mayor Whitmire is not the dictator of Houston, he does have the power to put some policies in place to address these traffic issues. How does his administration fit into this problem?
So, Houston in the late 2010s, former Mayor Sylvester Turner signed a Vision Zero pledge in the late 2010s to end traffic deaths by 2030. And in the years since he signed that, he had enacted a handful of reforms and policies and hired a bunch of people who understand how to design safe streets and put them in the position to take over designing streets. Since Mayor Whitmire took office in January, a lot of those folks either resigned or they were fired. Overturn is kind of normal in a new administration, but with this, every time you ask the mayor's office about Vision Zero 2030, they respond with saying Mayor Whitmire appreciates the goal, but he would prefer to end traffic deaths today.
Yeah.
It's a very nice sentiment. But if you look at what his administration is doing to do that, when you ask his administration, what are you doing to end traffic deaths today? The only response that we've gotten is heightened enforcement, traffic enforcement. And he's partnered with DPS to have troopers patrol streets, pulling people over, responding to calls. And traffic enforcement is a small piece of the puzzle in terms of solving the issue of traffic crashes, but it seems to be the only tool in his toolbox that he's wielding right now. He has yet to put forward any formal plan on transportation policy. He's asked his department heads to review a lot of the road safety projects that were initiated under former Mayor Sylvester Turner. He even ripped out a few of the newly installed pedestrian safety medians on Houston Avenue that were installed the month before he was inaugurated. And so we don't know what Mayor Whitmire's plan is to reduce traffic deaths other than what he said, which is heightened enforcement. And if you want to get into why enforcement isn't the only thing that can prevent traffic crashes, I'd be happy to talk about that, but that's basically it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that. And I'm glad you brought up the pedestrian issues that, he's kind of causing with the removal of those medians, right? Like reducing the walkability of the city, making people depend more on cars. So with that context, and I also want to get your thoughts on just the enforcement side of things, is there a correlation between these growing number of roadway deaths and the new policies that are put into place?
The mayor was inaugurated in January, and it's barely September. A lot has happened in the time since, but fixing infrastructure and coming up with those plans takes a lot of time. So I don't think it's Mayor Whitmire was inaugurated and all of a sudden, because of him and his policies, more people are dying on the streets. At the same time, it's a challenge that his office is faced with, despite, his best efforts to, increase enforcement. This is still happening.
For a long time, I've known that Holocaust Museum Houston is one of the largest Holocaust museums in the country. But did you know it's also the first fully bilingual Holocaust museum with galleries and exhibitions in English and Spanish? Being involved in my community and encouraging others to be more involved is really important to me, and that's why I'm excited that Holocaust Museum Houston is celebrating Latinx Heritage Month this September, and it's kicking it off with a special day of action on September 14th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's going to be drop-in museum tours, voter registration, and booths from local organizations supporting the local Latinx community. Plus, there's going to be a film screening about the life of civil rights activist Dolores Huerta, a performance by the Segundo Barrio Children's Chorus, and engaging panel discussions. And the best part, it's all free. Celebrate, learn, and take action. Visit hmh.org/Latinx for more details.
Hi, this is David, the CEO of CityCast. Do you ever find yourself holding back on travel because you're afraid of a language gap? Well, mind the gap no longer, as long as you have Babbel. Babbel is the science-backed language learning app. Its 10 minutes lessons are quick and handcrafted to get you talking your new language in 3 weeks. So I was reminded in the Olympics how much I love French. I had spoken French as a kid, but it has deteriorated to nothing. But I thought I would love to take a trip back to France with my girlfriend, but I'm embarrassed because my French is at 0. And I thought, why don't I get on Babbel and revive my French? And it's been a joy for the past few weeks. I'd forgotten everything. I'd forgotten plurals. I'd forgotten articles, vocabulary. Mostly I'd just forgotten how to speak and how to listen. And Babbel has me back on track with lots of speaking and lots of listening, because that's how you get better at a language. So I've been working on time, for example. And there's this way in French where when you say 2:45, you don't say 2:45, you say 3 o'clock minus 15. So, je rentre à 3h moins le quart. I'm coming back at 2:45. Anyway, it's so much fun to speak. And don't take my word for it. There's studies from Yale, from Michigan State University that prove that Babbel works. So, here's a special limited time deal for CityCast listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/citycast. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/citycast. Spelled BABBEL.com/citycast. Rules and restrictions may apply.
By the way, why wouldn't enforcement just help with all of this, right? Like when I think about when I'm on the road, especially on the freeways going 75 miles per hour, and I see people on their phones, I wish I could just write them a ticket, right? Like so much of the problem, in my opinion, could be solved with simply just getting rid of distracted drivers. And if everybody would just focus and not cut across 4 lanes at the last minute because they were on their phone to take an exit, why wouldn't enforcement just help?
Yeah. So enforcement is hit and miss. It's no secret that, law enforcement gets to pick and choose who they pull over. Another issue is I compare it to speed bumps quite a bit. People say drivers are flying down my street in their cars. We need a speed bump so they'll go slower. You install a speed bump at one point on the street. They'll slow down for that one point, and then right after they'll start speeding up right again until they hit another speed bump, and then they'll just keep going. If you're only going to slow down and drive safely in the presence of law enforcement, that's impossible for law enforcement to be at every single place that they need to be to stop bad driving.
But I'll tell you what, I'll be less inclined to use my phone if you give me $1,000 fine. And
that's so true. That's a good point. That would be a policy that could change, increasing the penalties for distracted driving. But that's, a city council issue. That's a state legislature issue. And currently, that's not on anybody's mind right now, increasing traffic fines.
Yeah, because they're all using their phones too, unfortunately.
They're all using their phone.
Everyone in charge is using their phones too. And it's, it's a problem. And I'm glad you brought that up. These policies, we can just say these, but it takes a while to actually get these passed and actually put into place. And then there are the civil rights issues that comes with more patrolling as well. Real quickly, did Mayor Whitmire or his administration say anything about your story and the numbers that you found?
Yes. So as soon as I got the numbers in hand, I sent it over to the mayor's office and asked them for a response. And they kind of balked at the numbers a little bit. They said that it was a spurious correlation. It's just basically a coincidence. They were saying it's just, it's a coincidence. We don't know if the year is going to end like this. They even called it a salacious premise for a news story,
Mm,
which I'm not a huge fan of. But
no.
this isn't a city of Houston issue. This is a
Oh, okay.
regional issue. It's happening in other cities across the country. In Los Angeles last year, they had more people die in traffic crashes than homicide for the full calendar year. And the mayor's administration in Los Angeles, when presented with that news, said we're going to do something about it. We care about this. This cannot happen in our city. And the Mayor Whitmire's response was just different, I'll say, than how other mayors have kind of handled similar news.
Okay, on the other side of things, like no one's talking about the homicide numbers because they're down 11% compared to last year. Any factors contributing to this trend? Did Mayor Whitmire talk about those numbers? Did he take credit for them? Because that's a good thing.
Violent crime across the board, across the country, is trending down. In the same way that I don't think Mayor Whitmire can take the blame for a rise in traffic crashes in the first 6 months. I don't think that he can take the credit for a lower homicide rate in the first 6 months. I think for both statistics, what's most important here is what he does now. These are a lot of good things to watch, in terms of the next, few years.
Okay, and let's talk about the next few years and the solutions because you've talked with experts who say a lot of traffic crashes are completely avoidable. What could local leaders do to make Houston's roads more safe?
I think the number one thing, and this is indicative of what a majority of crashes, fatal, serious injury crashes involve, is speed, reducing speeds. Experts say what helps is narrowing the road, narrowing your lane. If drivers feel like they can't go fast on the road, they won't go fast.
Mm,
If drivers feel they can go fast safely, not what the speed limit says, but what they feel, they're going to go as fast as they think they comfortably can. And so, again, like, enforcement can only fix that so much. And what you do is narrow streets, make corners, make intersections more visible. So it's easier for pedestrians to cross the street safely, particularly because drivers can see them. Cutting turns is also a big thing. Like, we have slip lanes in Houston.
yeah.
Those encourage people to drive fast, and it tells them it's okay for me to do that because it's there. And so it's just like little changes that the city could make single-handedly to a lot of our road infrastructure could make things a lot safer for drivers, for pedestrians, for cyclists,
Yeah.
for people in wheelchairs, for the gamut.
For me, this might sound like kumbaya hippie. We're all one in this, but I feel like personal responsibility is lost in all of this as well. And I think drivers forget that, like, yes, we can put all this in place, but there's this personal responsibility while keeping your community in mind, right? Like, don't drive like that. Put down the phone. I don't know how you implement this. Like, is it a human movement? Is it an educational process? But we often forget about that side of things too.
Absolutely. There's driver habits. It's what they do on the streets. People drive a lot here. If you're having a bad day, you're going to get behind the wheel and have a bad day behind the wheel. And
Yeah.
you aren't thinking about the impact that you make on other people when you're driving. And that is a really big point. If we can change people's behaviors, if we can make people realize the results of their actions, I really think that people would drive a lot safer.
Let's talk about how other Houstonians are feeling right now about road safety as well, because just over Labor Day weekend, there were three different crashes on Houston freeways and roads that left three people dead. One was on the Gulf Freeway feeder road where a driver hit and killed a cyclist. Another one involved a motorcyclist on the Northwest Freeway. And then on the South Loop, a man lost control in his car and died, although thankfully the passenger survived. But with reports like these, sometimes it makes us Houstonians worry about just how unsafe the roads are. In fact, on Reddit, I saw people saying that driving on the freeway is like driving in a Mad Max movie. So, do you get the same sense when you're talking to Houstonians?
I do. If you talk to people who say ride bikes or primarily walk to get around, they're going to say that the streets are dangerous. whether we have, far fewer fatalities, just because that's the experience that you have, and just like you were saying earlier with distracted driving, people making daring lane changes and stuff, we've come to expect that on our freeways and on our streets. And, it's why our cars are getting bigger and bigger. I also saw on Reddit, somebody was like, I have a 2013 SUV and I need something bigger to protect myself.
Wow.
And it's just, it's an arms race. It's a vehicle arms race, and they're getting bigger. They're getting flatter on the front end. They're getting taller. And it's, it's wild.
Okay, Jay, last thing, as TxDOT unveils plans to expand more freeways, we'll see more drivers on the road because historically more lanes equals more drivers. So how is that going to work with this ambitious goal of Vision Zero, which you mentioned, no traffic deaths by 2030, but as Mayor Whitmire has put it, he wants that to occur right now. He wants it in 2024. How do these two things work hand in hand?
The expansion of freeways here in Houston are framed around making it easier for people to get where they want to go faster. Secondly comes safety, road safety. When they redid the 59 at 610 interchange, a big part of that was increasing your visual distance. So they are saying that they're trying to make it safer for people to do that, but that doesn't take away the fact that, just like you said, that means more people are going to be driving, more chances of somebody messing up, more chances of, somebody missing a turn, and more cars on the road does not make the road safer.
Jay, this was very interesting, and I'm glad you pulled these numbers, and we'll see how the remainder of the year plays out with these numbers in mind as well. I appreciate you joining us, and continued success, man.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
That was Axios Houston reporter J.R. Jordan. You can read his story with the link in our show notes. And please share this episode with 3 friends who need to do a better job of driving around H-Town. You can also rate and review the podcast wherever you listen to help us grow the show. That will do it for today. I'm Rahil Ramzanali. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.